Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Naruto Was the Flying Thunder God, Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
With a quiet thump, a sharp kunai sank into a branch just above Konohamaru's head, but not even a hair's breadth away. The nin didn't even flinch when he almost got hit. He just made a small change to his Hitai 8. He gave a quiet whistle, impressed. When the Junin moved just a little bit, he could feel the cold, sharp edge touch the very edge of his head. He found the person he was looking for. Finally. Konohamaru fell out of the tree in one smooth motion and landed in a crouch on the forest floor below. His eyes got smaller as he looked up to the tops of the trees. "Okay, Naruto, you can show yourself," he said, trying to catch the faintest hint of orange in the bushes around him or in the tops of the trees, where the kunai had come from. He was sure that the master prankster was nearby, but there was nothing. "I looked for you everywhere. Where have you been?" "Not here," Naruto's voice said to him from above. "Is it urgent?" Konohamaru quickly turned around to look up the tree he was leaning against. The kunai that had almost cut off his head had just turned into Naruto, who was now hanging upside down with his legs wrapped around one of the lower branches. Naruto looked bored. He was gently swinging back and forth. He was wearing his usual comfortable black and orange clothes, and his hair was spread out around his head in a funny way because he had let it grow longer than usual. He didn't wear a vest to show his rank because the whiskers on his face were enough to show who he was. "The boss is just ahead, in the middle of training," the clone said in a helpful way. "Konohamaru, you're getting rusty watching over those kids if you can't feel his chakra from here. Did you come for a spar or something?" Naruto's voice made him sound a couple of years younger than he was, and his smile was as bright as ever. "Are you never going to grow up?" Konohamaru asked with a laugh. "I'm happy with what I can do, so don't put me through the loops again. At least not today." Naruto was sad. Konohamaru said, "I could bring the kids if you promise to be easy on them. They could use the practice for the Chunin exams, which is part of why I came to look for you." The back of Naruto's head was rubbed. Konohamaru was patient as he waited. "The exams are this week in Konoha," the clone said as he swung his whole body back, let go of the branch, did a backflip in the air, and landed gracefully in front of the Junin. "Does Ba-chan want me to take part?" Konohamaru paused. "Not exactly. But could I tell the real you this? It's just weird to always talk to a copy of you." The clone shrugged and said, "It's not like there's a difference." Fine, go to the swearing then," he said with a smile as he vanished in a puff of smoke. There was a loud shout, a crash, and then a bright flash of red light. Not too far ahead, Konohamaru could hear Naruto swearing like a sailor. "Stupid clones always make it hard for me to focus," Naruto said as he kicked the nearest tree and cursed. Everything around him was burned to the ground, crumbled, and dying, as if from a very hot fire. Naruto even had a couple of small burns that were quickly going away and getting better. Konohamaru quickly reached his oldest friend by using the Shunshin no Jutsu, laughing at Naruto's bad luck. He said, "Sorry about that, but he didn't really mean it." "There's a smartass idiot in every batch," Naruto said with irritation as he turned to him, the last burn marks on his face disappearing. "You broke my concentration, so thanks for nothing. What did Ba-chan want from me this time, then?" "Actually, she's thinking about retiring," Konohamaru said with a smile at the corners of his lips. "When the Chunin test is over." Naruto blinked, nodding. "I guess it was bound to happen someday. Who will be the Hokage then?" Konohamaru snickered. "Give it some thought, Naruto." "Who are you?" the blonde asked. "Don't you think you're a bit short to be a Hokage?" The younger Junin made a sad face. "Guess again. Then there's Kakashi. He's been passed over before, when there was a lot of fuss." Guy-sensei was inconsolable when he found out he'd gotten a special suit made for the event, but he never got to wear it. No, Konohamaru cried out, shaking. "You're making this way too hard, you know. Who is the son of a Kage again? Who was a hero of the Fourth Shinobi War?" "Stupid. Gaara is the Kage," Naruto said in a dry tone. "Besides, how can you be the Kage of two different villages? That sounds like cheating to me." Konohamaru was so angry that he was almost pulling out his hair. He yelled at Naruto, She thinks you should be Hokage." Naruto said in a calm voice, "I know. What?" Naruto gave a thin smile. I talked to her a few minutes ago. Well, a clone did. Ba-chan and I have been talking about this for a while. She thought I needed to know everything about running a village before she made it official. He smiled. You know, when she first offered me lessons, I thought it was just so she could save time on paperwork by letting me work with my clones, but I guess I finally passed her mission, huh? He put his arms across his chest. You had to ruin my good news. I spent the last hour searching you throughout the training grounds. I can act surprised if you want, Naruto said with a smile. Then, his eyes grew wide and he put his hand over his mouth. Me, the Hokage? He stuck out his tongue again. Konohamaru, do you know what this means? I won our race. I'm going to be the best Hokage ever, believe it. The Junin groaned and rubbed his forehead as he said, thank you. You are a true friend. Rival, Naruto whispered, looking around and putting a finger to his mouth to tell him to be quiet. You meant to use the word, rival. Konohamaru waved him away and said, yes, of course, how stupid of me. Why don't we go celebrate your new job? I thought you'd like to go to Ichiraku's together now that you can still go there without getting mobbed. I figured you'd be hungry, too. Naruto said, maybe later, and he smiled as Konohamaru's eyes grew wide at the refusal of ramen. Naruto said with pride, I'm busy, you see. Today is the day I'm finally going to use that technique. That thing. Konohamaru looked bored all of a sudden. You said the same thing last year. No, I promise, I really got it this time, Naruto exclaimed, eagerly nodding. I know I figured it all out this time. It's too easy. I was paying so much attention to the space part that I completely forgot about the time part. Konohamaru said with a raised eyebrow. What does that mean? Naruto put his hands together and said, see, it's like this. He then moved his hands apart until there was a small space between them. Imagine that this is a road from here to Ichiraku's house. If you have to body flicker there. For effect, he made a small puff of smoke appear around his left hand and quickly moved it to the right. That saves a lot of time, but you still have to go through all the land in between. He put his left hand back where it was. Now, if I had to use the Hiraishin, it would work differently, Naruto said as he called up a clone of himself right in front of him. The clone's pose was almost the same as his, with their hands almost touching. It's more like I have to change the distance to get closer to the target, the clone said, wiggling the fingers on his left hand and patting the real Naruto's right hand. In a way, I wouldn't have moved more than a single step, but I will have gone the whole distance anyway. I don't see how that helps you, said Konohamaru with a frown and a chin rub. You've talked about something similar before. Naruto nodded. Ah, here's the funny and hard part, he told his clone. The clone moved back into place. I kept losing track of time, which is why it didn't work. You see, I have to get there just before I leave. You can't be in two places at the same time. I can't even imagine what would happen if you did, and the future doesn't exist yet, so there's only one choice. The Naruto who was talking disappeared in a puff of smoke, and the one Konohamaru thought was the clone smiled and waved with his left hand. In a way, it's like using a body switch with a clone before you even start the technique. The small difference in time between arriving and leaving can't be seen, but it's necessary. Konohamaru asked, and how do you do all of that? You mean the part where you switch? Naruto awkwardly scratched the back of his head. It has to do with how the seal is made. I spent years figuring that out, he said, pointing to a tree a few meters away where a three-pronged kunai with a seal tied around the handle was stuck into the thick oak wood. The seal helps you find a place you want to go. If it's drawn right, it's not actually there at any given time, even though it may look like it is. It's kind of drawn to be forever delayed in time, rather than in the present. That's why I can't just jump there. I need to find the closest point in the past to use. But every time I try, there's some kind of resistance. I'm trying to push through with more and more chakra, but it's already getting to ridiculous levels. The fourth couldn't have used this much. On top of that, the jutsu is disorienting. It's like I need to be in two places at once, and I feel like I'm everywhere and nowhere, and it's trying to tear me apart. And the thing that's on fire? He asked, pointing to the burned earth around them. What was going on? Naruto gave a shrug. Oh, that's just Kurama's chakra. I don't have enough concentration to try to find the connection with the seal and keep the chakra at safe levels at the same time. I mean, I probably could, but it would make the technique at least twice as hard, and I can work on efficiency when I have the basics down. It's not like it does me any lasting harm. Konohamaru nodded slowly. Say, Naruto, he said, thinking. You said you feel like you're falling apart, and the jutsu is supposed to move every part of you and everything you're carrying, right? Yeah, Naruto said with a hopeful look. Got any great ideas? You said earlier that you can't be in both places at once, but you're trying to. How many clones do you have running around right now? What does that have to do with? Naruto stopped in the middle of a sentence, his eyes wide. Oh, you're a genius. There was a loud echo of popping sounds all over the training ground as many clones disappeared. Naruto grimaced and rubbed the side of his head as he heard. Man, half of them decided to not train as hard as they should have. It makes sense that you would forget you're using a technique that uses a lot of energy, Konohamaru said with a smile and a shake of the head. Maybe if you're just you, it won't be so hard to get this. If this works, you owe me a lesson with the kids, right? Naruto nodded, smiling. Well, then, let's see. You might want to take a step back, just in case. Naruto closed his eyes, and chakra started pouring out of his pores. Power swirled around him, and he could see it. This is going to be great. Have faith. When Naruto gave that kind of warning, any smart shinobi would duck and cover like their life depended on it, because it probably did. Naruto never did things halfway. There was a rush of chakra building up, and vicious tendrils of the Kyuubi's chakra lashed out at everything around the Jinchuriki, shredding skin and earth like paper. If that was all that was left of the real chakra being channeled, it must have been a huge amount. Naruto yelled, Hiraishin no Jutsu, in a hoarse voice, and in an orange flash, he was gone. Naruto didn't know where he was and was in a lot of pain. He felt like he had landed in water in the middle of a spin, and it was already burning his lungs. Then he realized it wasn't water, and he had no idea which way was up. But it hurt, and Naruto tried desperately to get out of where he was and right himself, but he couldn't see the seal or anything else. He felt like he was lost, gone, and all alone in the nothingness around him. Pain and hopelessness were old friends of his, but it was one thing to be in pain and a whole other thing to live in a world where there was nothing but pain crashing through him like waves. There was nothing else, and nothing else mattered. Naruto was starting to lose any semblance of conscious thought, and he was almost gone, when all of a sudden, he got it back. A connection. Something that was both close and far away, but still made him feel at home. There was a seal that he had once lost and then found again. He grabbed that chance, and because he was desperate, he held on tight and dragged himself to his goal. As he crashed into something big and hairy and heard a thunderous rumble, the world came into focus around him. He screamed because the pain in his body was getting worse. It felt like a force that couldn't be stopped was trying to pull something out of him. It didn't take him long to put everything together. Kurama. Naruto saw a jumble of colors moving around in front of him. He heard a loud, angry roar that hurt his ears, and the smell of drying blood and wet fur overpowered his sense of smell. The world was there, but the pain he felt when he got there made it hard to see. Something terrible had gone wrong. He couldn't fight against the force that was pulling the Kyuubi out of him. It was impossible to win. Even when he tried to hold on to a tiny bit of chakra, he lost more and more of it as it rushed through his weak resistance. It was like him trying to stop a landslide by himself. He could feel the hum of some strange fuinjutsu. That couldn't be a good sign. Since his senses were still all over the place, he could only guess what they were for or who used them. The released chakra pulsed strongly at the edge of his senses, making him feel like he had felt it before. Could it be some kind of wall to keep him from getting away? Naruto's mind went to the Akatsuki for a moment, to how they were trying to steal all the tailed beasts and use them as weapons of war. Had someone finally taken over their job now that peace was almost here? Had he been caught for the same horrible reason as Gaara? Kurama yelled something incoherent inside his mind, and Naruto tried as hard as he could to keep his friend inside, but the chakra kept slipping away. He tried to answer, but quickly realized that he couldn't talk to the bundle of confusion and pain that was scratching at the bars of its old prison. Kyuubi no Yuko's power surrounded him with a yellow glow and poured chakra into him like a waterfall. Naruto realized that Kurama was scared of something so much that it scared the Jinchuriki as well. Where did he find himself? Naruto ground his teeth and tried to move, but he seemed to be stuck. Some kind of chakra bond seemed to be holding him to the Kyuubi, a huge creature that roared and drooled. But it wasn't the same Biju that he felt leaking away. Instead, he and the other Kyuubi were held in place by silver chains that glowed. How was it that he could still feel Kurama inside of him, but here it was, almost free? Did he already lose this much of the nine-tailed beast? Naruto moved and used all the power he could muster to break the silver bonds, sending 1,000 ripples down the chains. All around him, the links were snapping, making the field sound like thousands of bells ringing at once. In the heavy rain, the silver chakra broke and fell apart. Naruto started to fall when he was finally freed from his bonds. At that very moment, the terrible feeling of being drained increased tenfold, and Kurama's chakra layer suddenly peeled off, leaving only burned skin underneath. The vicious chakra hurt him the most on his face and stomach. His skin was burned and tore with the slightest movement, and blood poured from the wounds. Naruto cried out in pain, but he didn't give up. He tried to turn while he was in the air, but he couldn't do it. He fell hard on his side. One or more of the bones in his left arm broke with a snap. With all the pain his body was already in, it didn't seem like much an injury. Kurama! Naruto yelled out in a panic. What's happening? Where are we? The big biju shook itself, and all the pieces of the chain flew off like raindrops when a dog shakes itself. Then, while still growling, it looked at Naruto with a questioning look, its mouth wide open to show its sharp teeth as it took a deep breath. Kurama seemed pretty confused. It even showed signs of inner conflict, and Naruto didn't know if that would help him or not. At least the biju wasn't trying to kill him on purpose, yet. A man shouted in panic, "What did you do?" From a short distance away, "It will get away." When Naruto turned around to face the new person, he stopped in his tracks. Impossible. It was like looking in a mirror, except that the man in front of him didn't have whiskers. The man had blonde hair the same length as Naruto's, and the bright strands stood out without any pattern. Their designs were also very similar, and when they moved into a ready position, they did it at exactly the same time. If their clothes had been the same, he was sure that no one would have been able to tell them apart without looking closely. Naruto was wearing his usual black and orange clothes. His chest showed through a few burns in his jumper, and his own blood was painted on the fabric. The man on the other side of him wore something dark blue and green. If it weren't for one thing, it could have been a modified Jonin uniform. The only thing that stood out was a white coat that hung over everything else and billowed in the wind, making red flame like highlights at the edges jump in and out of view. Even though Naruto couldn't see it, he knew that there were kanji on the back that said the man in question was the fourth Hokage, his parent. Oh, **T. Even though they only looked at each other for a second, Naruto used that time to look at his father's face, which he didn't think he'd see again outside of the carving in the mountain. He looked young, but he already had a lot of life experience. He was at the peak of his life. The surprise on his father's face was the same as his son's, but there was something strange about it, and Namikaze Minato's eyes had a dark glow. They were full of mistrust, anger, fear, and desperation. Naruto said to himself, Edo Tensei. He couldn't think of anything else it could be. Before he really thought about it, he put his hands in a clone seal. His left arm still hurt, but it was already getting better. Not all of the Kyuubi's power had left him yet. He bit his lip in worry as he thought about how hard it might be for him to talk to Kurama and stop a fake version of his father's image when he was getting weaker and weaker. He had to move quickly or he would lose all the chakra he still had. "Don't get any closer," he yelled, hoping Minato would listen. After all, the impure resurrection gave the dead some will and control. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A wave of orange, black, and red appeared around him on the battlefield. It was made up of many hundreds of clones, some of which were even sitting on the Kyuubi. Kurama and the fourth both looked like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Minato said, with anger in his voice, "Such power, you must work for that man. Are you some kind of doppelganger who uses genjutsu?" The man asked. He didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he threw a spread of kunai in a wide arc at the huge army of clones and shouted his next words loudly so they could be heard farther away. "Take care of Naruto, Kushina." When Naruto heard the yell, he felt like his blood had frozen. Kushina? They had brought her back to life, too? No, that didn't make sense. Neither did the part about himself. In an instant, nothing made sense. At that moment, memories of an exhausted woman who was somewhere behind the fourth came flooding into his mind. She was standing on shaky legs while covering a small baby with her body. She had an expression of unmatched determination. On her back were loose ends of chains that were slowly falling apart. These were the chakra chains that he had broken. At that moment, when he was completely shocked, his clones began to fall. Kurama sprang into action when it got rid of whatever confusion had been holding it back. Its huge jaws closed on a dozen clones and tore them apart until they popped, and it howled in anger. Those who had climbed onto the fox's back were the first to die. It only took a few seconds for the other clones to react and kill back in retaliation. The Kyuubi's short hesitation at the coordinated response helped the clone army, because the Kyuubi was quickly overpowered by the sheer number of clones, which darted between its legs, hid behind its ears, and tried to cause as much chaos as possible. With Naruto, there was a huge chance of chaos, of course. Kurama yelled in anger when one brave clone pulled at its whiskers while dozens of others grabbed its legs and pushed it down. While the clones kept the fox busy, Naruto focused on what could have been an even bigger threat. The fourth Hokage ripped through the field of Naruto's like a god of war, with two of his three-pronged kunai flashing so quickly that there was barely time to give a warning before he was gone again. He seemed to be everywhere and anywhere, killing dozens of people. This man had once killed most of an army by himself, and it was clear. When Naruto realized that his father could show up at any time and would be just as cruel to him as he was to the clones, he knew he had to try to protect himself. Even Guy praised Naruto's recent improvements in taijutsu training, but his father was so crazy that he was sometimes called the best shinobi that the Leaf Village had ever made. The blows that his clones tried to land were easy for his father to avoid, and his kunai were already killing people, and he hadn't even used his Rasengan yet. Naruto's most powerful jutsu were the only things that could stop someone like that, but he was afraid to use some of them because he knew how dangerous they could be. A Rasen Shuriken might have put an end to everything, but if it hit someone, it would probably kill them. "Stop!" yelled a clone in panic when the fourth showed up right next to him. His eyes grew wide when he saw the fourth's kunai flashing. "We don't have to," but as the metal went through his throat, he vanished in a puff of smoke. His father kept beating him even though Naruto's clones kept begging him to stop. Naruto tried to figure out how to stop this or at least get his father to talk. It looked like the fourth was sure that he was the target of some kind of genjutsu or something similar. Naruto realized that he would have thought the same thing if it had been the other way around. But if his theory was right, which seemed more and more likely, then this was neither genjutsu nor Edo Tensei, even though it was still crazy. Kurama screamed in anger as it stomped towards the broken barrier, ignoring the chains and clones that were holding it back. It was a slow process because the creature seemed confused, and it took its time to eat stray clones along the way, biting at them with a fevered look in its eyes. Naruto, to the surprise of the fourth, called up a few hundred more clones and sent them over to help his weakening hordes. Naruto realized with a shudder that he was getting a pretty good idea of what it was like to be eaten by a monster biju. So far, calling the fox Kurama has had the best effect of making it take extra care to eat the clones in question. It seemed like it didn't know who he was. The barrier was found by Naruto's clones not too far away from where they were fighting. The fourth had to get ready for it ahead of time. It was the same Fuinjutsu that he felt going up right after he arrived. It was strong enough to hold back the Kyuubi for a few minutes or even withstand the impact of a single Biju bomb. It wouldn't be enough, though, for a long fight, and the fox would get through. Even more interesting than the barrier was the fact that a few clones had seen smoke columns rising in the distance, where he could see the shape of mountains he knew. Naruto knew exactly where he was. He was on one of Konoha's training grounds outside the city, but it was different from the one he remembered. This wasn't Edo Tensei, it was something else altogether. When Naruto realized what was happening, he shuddered and felt a pang of fear. Could all of this be because he used Hiraishin with Kyuubi's chakra? His father, his mother, and the freed Kyuubi were all here, and Konoha was on fire. This couldn't just happen by chance. His use of his father's signature skill must have sent him back in time, which is why Kurama was quiet. Kurama was chakra itself, and it already existed in this time and place. Only one of the two could win, and his came here weak and empty of chakra. He was afraid that he knew who was winning the fight between his own fox and the free one. Naruto set his mind on the battlefield and gritted his teeth. He was ready to try his best to avoid the jutsu that had landed there. If he couldn't get his father to stop attacking or make the Kyuubi go away, he and the fox would both run out of chakra in a few minutes. He had never been in that situation before, and there was a good chance he would die. He was desperate, so he forced a couple of clones to jump to safer places, hide, and stay still so they could collect chakra in case he needed it. No matter if he died here or not, he couldn't change the past. Naruto's eyes got bigger as he thought about his own Kurama going away. He went to the only person inside the barrier who could help him, the only one who had been in the same situation just hours earlier. He walked up to his mother all by himself, with his arms outstretched and his palms facing her. It was a way for him to show that he didn't have any weapons, leaving himself open to attack. Naruto's first thought was to walk up to Kushina and give her a hug because she looked so tired and worn out. Naruto told himself that he couldn't do that because she might stab him at that moment if she thought he was an enemy. So he stopped and slowly fell to the floor next to her. "Mom," he said without putting much thought into it. Kushina shook, and both of her hands fell. She was getting ready to do some kind of jutsu when she saw his eyes and heard his voice shaking. Her hard look changed, and she looked at him twice. "You." Naruto nodded slowly. "Naruto? You look so much like him. Like Minato." She looked back at the baby she was holding, then back at Naruto's face as an adult, and she sobbed and fell to her knees. "You're... How? How could this be?" Behind them, a clone managed to catch the fourth by coming out of the ground, and he was followed by a dozen more. Some of the clones managed to grab the Hokage by the hem of his cloak, trying to slow him down as much as possible so that one of them could live long enough to deliver a message. But the yellow flash turned out to be much too fast and cruel. He changed direction to avoid Naruto's clones, pulled out another kunai, and he saw Naruto crouching right next to Kushina. This time, the Hiraishin was even faster than before, leaving only the white cloak on top of a huge pile of Naruto clones. All of them popped when the Kyuubi stepped on them, like a big balloon, and it snarled in anger as hundreds more clung to it, making it unable to get away. The fourth Hokage showed up at Kushina's side without making a sound, and his three-pronged kunai was already slashing at Naruto's throat at lightning speed. Kushina yelled, "No, Minato," and put out her arm to catch her husband. The blade grazed Naruto's neck and froze it for just a second before ripping it in two. It didn't even draw much blood. Naruto was afraid to take a breath because he could feel the edge so clearly, and the cold steel was still as a rock. Minato said, with anger in his eyes, "This is the real you. Why should I bother to?" Kushina yelled, "Minato," as she wrapped her hand around his wrist. "Look, this is Naruto, look." Minato's anger finally went away. It had been strong ever since this strange newcomer tore the Kyuubi out of the Kushina's bonds. He looked at Naruto again with narrowed eyes as he thought about how they were alike and how they were different. He glanced down at the baby in Kushina's arms. "Prove it," he said, and he pulled the kunai back. His voice was full of doubt and worry. The momentary silence was broken by Kurama's horrible laughter, which tore up hordes of Naruto clones as it broke free of the last few chakra chains. Kushina slumped, and it would only be a few minutes before he also broke through Minato's barrier. Naruto took a quick look at the fight and realized he didn't have much time. He raised his hand and made a perfect sphere with the Rasengan, a swirling whirlpool of blue chakra. Minato blinked, his jaws loosened, and he nodded to show that he knew. Then he took a step forward and desperately hugged Naruto. "Hey! Look at the Rasengan." Naruto dodged the attack at the last second and sagged into the hug, relieved. It took him only a moment to realize that Minato was laughing under his breath, and he jerked back to look at his grown-up son. "How?" Minato asked as Kushina hugged Naruto, with the smaller version of him clinging to her and crying. Kushina's hug was much weaker than his father's, since she only moved because she was so determined. Naruto quickly said, "I've used Hiraishin. I might have used a little too much chakra, I think. You look like you're my age. How on earth did you get that much?" Minato clicked his tongue once, and his eyes lit up. "I sealed Kyuubi into you, didn't I? You did the jutsu with its chakra. That should be enough." Naruto nodded to show that he agreed. "But it's clear that something went wrong. No matter what happened, it changed my seal in some way. Kurama like he's being ripped away from me." As if on cue, Kyuubi roared, getting louder, and Naruto almost fell down, his legs shaking. "See," he said in a weak voice. "That's how it's been getting better. I can't seal him if he's moving around like that," Minato said with a grimace. "Can you imagine what Kyuubi could do if it had twice as much chakra as usual? Should we even seal him?" "What do you mean?" Naruto asked in a hurry. "Kurama and I have a deal, if you will. If he would just listen to me." He took a deep breath and sent nearly 100 more clones back towards the Kyuubi. This time, the jutsu was hard on Naruto, and he almost passed out from the strain. It took him a few painful breaths to get back up. He seems to have gone crazy. "Do you want to talk to it? Are you sure it's possible to talk to him?" Kushina asked. Kushina shivered. "I can't believe you made a deal with a creature like this when you talked to it." "No, Naruto finally said, just as the memory of a clone getting bit in half came back to him. Kurama. Even though he was mean, things were getting better. Ioi shared a body as a Jinchuriki and a Biju. It wasn't terrible. Whether or not it can be reasoned with, it's clearly not in a state for it right now, Minato said. Sealing this. Kurama is our only chance right now. We're so tired that we can't even think of anything else to do. Since you were able to figure out how to get along with him, what's to say that it can't happen again? Minato sighed. If that ever happens, the seal could be broken. But to seal Kyuubi, I need him to stay still for a few seconds, and that's getting harder and harder. I won't get another shot. Can you call the chains again, Kushina? Kushina shook her head weakly and said, no, not even if I spent everything I had left. She shook. I'm out of chakra, so I'm not sure I could even make the chains stick anymore. Maybe you should just take a chance with a moving Kyuubi. It's better than. Before they even finished the first phase of the Rasen Shuriken, the Kyuubi slammed 3 clones to the ground. Another 3 had to run away to different sides before they were also crushed. It was looking more and more hopeless now that reinforcements weren't coming. It's not necessary. Naruto stood up straighter and said, there is one thing that has worked for me in the past. It might give you a good chance to use the Shiki Fujin, but please let me be the one to use it. I know all the hand seals I need to know, and as long as you and he are alive. Minato and Kushina both said, no. Minato reached out and put his hand on Naruto's shoulder as he looked into his son's eyes. I've always known you were meant for great things, and Jiraiya-sensei thought the same thing. The sacrifice you're making is proof of how great you are. But Naruto, you won't die today. If I let you do this instead of me, I wouldn't be worth anything. Isn't it the job of a father to take care of his children? Naruto nodded and looked down at the ground. I get it. A Hokage has to take care of his village and family before his own life, right? I wish there was something else to do. I wish I could meet you. As you say, it is my duty. The Kyuubi can't cause trouble everywhere. Most likely, you already know what happened to Konoha. That could happen anywhere. He paused and looked at her with narrowed eyes. Have you heard of the masked man? Naruto nodded glumly. Then you understand why I do it. We can't kill the Kyuubi, so the only thing we can do is hide him and seal him again, because we will need his power in the future. It will be needed again by the village. I can tell by the look on your face that you know this too. Naruto sighed, and focused. The clones he had sent out before had enough time to gathering the necessary amount of natural energy for his last strategy. Minato smiled at his son when he saw the distinct sage eyes forming. Toad-like, they shone strangely in the night, the skin darkening around them with dark pigmentation. Minato said with pride and surprise, you're a toad sage, just like Jiraiya. You're his student too? Yup. And it's not the same as the one the pervert sage has. Naruto answered, it's better, and he gave a weak smile. Be ready when I leave an opening. I'm going to tear that fox a new one. Believe it. He ran forward quickly, making a few copies of himself as he went. All the remaining clones gathered between the barrier and Kurama. Each of them raised a hand, poured the last of Kyuubi's chakra into it, and mixed it with natural energy. Several Rasengans flickered to life, and they grew bigger and brighter quickly. The horde rushed forward, shouting, Senpo, Chudama Rasen Tarangan. The Kyuubi jumped away from the attack, as if realizing how powerful it was, but it wasn't fast enough to avoid the storm. The seemingly endless barrage of Rasengans infused with Sage Chakra was devastating as a huge explosion of chakra blew in all directions, sending shock waves through the air. Kurama was thrown back, its huge body rolling over and smashing into the mountainside. Minato rushed through his seal array. The fox was confused, but not for long. When the dust settled, he finally finished his jutsu. Shiki Fujin, he said as a final note, calling the specter of the death god to hover just above him in its shadowy presence. Only he could see the monster. Pale and grotesque, the Shinigami looked over everything with the calmness of death, waiting for an order. I will seal our chakra in little Naruto, so we will see him again, someday. Minato looked down at his wife and said, it was worth it. He is our real son. You saw what he can do now, didn't you? Kushina gave a weak nod and a small smile. Seal. Minato pointed angrily at the Kyuubi, who was hiding in the dust clouds. The death god's ghostly hand shot out of his stomach, grabbed the fox, and slowly pulled the fox's soul out of its huge body. Minato growled as the technique tore off a piece of the tailed beast for the Shinigami to eat. There was no way to seal the whole Kyuubi, especially with the energy of the other Kyuubi making it stronger. The death god ate that part of the Bijuu's energy, and Minato winced as the surge of chakra went through him, knowing he would soon follow it. Naruto was trying to catch his breath, but he couldn't. He had just used a very expensive jutsu, and it had left him on the edge of consciousness. At least the pain from losing Kurama had finally gone away. He was no longer a Jinchuriki, so he probably knew how Gaara felt. He was by himself, leaning against the half-broken trunk of a huge tree. Dust was everywhere, but he could hear shouting from behind the barrier. Naruto didn't pay attention to that distraction because he couldn't waste any time. Kyuubi was slowly getting up, which was bad news. Naruto tried to stand up, but his legs were shaking too much, so he fell on his face. Surprisingly, he didn't land on dirt, but on something soft and white. Naruto wasted some time trying to remember when his father had lost his cloak and why he was on top of it. A clone must have picked it up while fighting Kurama, but after that one was killed in the last attack, it was left alone. With a shiver, Naruto realized that he was cold and why. The Kyuubi's chakra had washed over him like a tide, and he had only survived because he was used to it. Naruto quickly threw the cloak over his back, and pulled on the sleeves, closing it on the front. It was that or running around half naked. The Rasengan barrage had proven a drop more deadly outside the mindscape, since he had never really used it outside his fight with the Kyuubi when first taking its chakra. His surroundings were a wasteland. Focusing once more on his fluctuating chakra levels and his tired muscles, Naruto forced himself to stand up, panting loudly at even that small action. He saw the Kyuubi lashing out at his father in the distance, but he was too far away to do anything about it, and did not have the chakra to pull it off anyway. He had maybe a single jutsu in him, if that. Naruto felt anger rising inside, washing over the pain, as he realized that this was the moment that his father died, and he was not there to help him out. Focusing whatever remains of chakra he had, he roared together with Kurama, and he knew with complete certainty where he wanted to be right then. Hiraishin no Jutsu. Minato. Someone yelled from just behind the fence, but Naruto had already left before he heard it. He appeared right next to Minato, just in time to push him away from the Kyuubi's claws. The fourth turned around, and a Rasengan appeared in his hand without him having time to prepare it. He slammed it into the creature's paw, and it bit deep into Kurama's flesh, making the Biju back away. I still need to do the Hake Fuin. I can't move. I'm in so much pain. Minato yelled in a desperate way. The Kyuubi was confused for only a second, but Kushina stood up with a fierce expression and raised her arms. Chains appeared again and lashed out at the huge creature, and she almost fell down from the strain. She looked 20 years older than she did before as she struggled to get up on her knees. I've got this. Naruto jumped in front of Minato. His father was too slow to do the hard jutsu now, and for once, the yellow flash was out of power himself. Naruto slammed his right hand on the ground and called forth the ceremonial sealing pedestal. Jiraiya taught me how it works, but I never thought I'd need to use it. Minato, with heavy and slow movements, leaned forward and picked up the little Naruto, placing him on top of the altar with very slow movements. You have to seal a part of me in Kushina too, when you do it. Why you both? Naruto couldn't stop the tears from falling down his cheeks as he watched history unfold in all its terrible glory. Why mom, too? He asked. You used the Shiki Fujin, but she should be able to live. Kushina said in a soft voice, I'm sorry, Naruto. This last attack. After this, there is nothing left. If you don't seal it away, when it breaks, all of my chakra will be gone, and so will my life. No, you can't die again, Naruto sobbed. This is the one chance I have to let you live. Let me give you some chakra. No matter what happens to me, you must live. For Naruto the other. Kyuubi roared again, breaking some of Kushina's chains. The force of his anger threw Kushina to the ground again, and this time she didn't get back up. Naruto was frozen in a moment of pure terror. He had most of Minato's chakra in his hands and was ready to seal it away with the Kyuubi. But he couldn't seal away his own mother, could he? Sealing required a bond between someone's chakra and the seal, and when the seal was activated, it would pull in every last bit of his parents' chakra and kill them. Naruto, Kushina said in a weak voice, my life is already over. Don't ever think that I would give up my own life to save yours. I am your father. The Kyuubi opened its mouth and snarled something that couldn't be understood as it jumped to kill them all with a single, deadly bite. Minato whispered, I'm proud of you. His eyes darkened, and he moved as fast as lightning, breaking through his limits in the face of death. He called a final Rasengan into his hand and jumped straight at the Kyuubi, where he would meet the Biju in a final clash. "Dad!" Naruto shouted, desperately gathering his chakra for the final push needed to seal away the Kyuubi. Its jaws closed around the fourth Hokage, and there was a quiet explosion inside its mouth as the powerful Rasengan exploded inside its throat. Kurama hissed in pain, thrashing around blindly. Naruto hoped to see his father use the Hiraishin to come back to them, but there was only a sickening crunch that sent shivers down. "Kuchiyose no Jutsu!" Naruto yelled, refocusing his mind to call Gamatora for the last part of the sealing process. For a moment, he felt a great sense of panic when he realized he was in the past. Would the summoning contract even work? Then, with a loud puff of smoke, a toad appeared in front of him, and he breathed a sigh of relief. "Quick! Gamatora, I need you to take the key of the seal to Jiraiya," he told the confused toad, tears and sweat running down his face. The toad obeyed and rolled the key scroll around himself. When it saw the huge Kyuubi towering over him, its eyes widened. "Minato-sama, watch out." Naruto half turned from the pedestal and barely noticed that Kurama's claw was headed toward the pedestal, where his younger self was crying on the altar. Kushina tried to get in the way, raising up into a half-crouch to roll over the baby, but Naruto knew it wasn't going to be enough, and he jumped between Kushina and the approaching claw. The toad summon disappeared just as the Kyuubi's nail pierced through Naruto and Naruto laughed as he felt the chakra draining from him and coughing up blood. It was over. The Hake Fuin was finished. The huge fox cried out in protest as its chakra began to surge into its new vessel, and most of Minato's chakra followed. One last tendril remained with Naruto, and he smiled in recognition. Kushina looked at Naruto and saw his eyes. "Be careful," she said. There were a lot of things they didn't say, but their eyes were locked, and they were frozen in the moment before death. Some words didn't need to be said. "Never blame yourself," was her last whisper. Then, there was a huge surge of power as the big Biju was pulled into the seal on the boy's stomach and crashed into the baby like a storm. The older Naruto fell when the claw that had hit him disappeared, and he just barely caught Kushina's body before losing his own footing and falling to the rough, hard ground. The last of the natural energy that had kept him going was leaving him. "So this is what it feels like to be chakra drained," he whispered to himself as darkness crept into his mind. "Is this how it all ends?" A shape was moving quickly toward him, and it stopped right next to him. Naruto whispered, "Oji-san," when he saw Sarutobi. Even in the past, the nin looked quite old. The third Hokage's surprised face made Naruto laugh a little, and he coughed up blood. "I'm Naruto from the future," he wanted to say, but all he could do was hug Kushina tighter and say his name, too. The last thing he heard was a child crying and the words, "Your son is safe." The softness of his father's cloak kept him warm as he lost consciousness. He no longer knew. Everyone had bandages. Naruto felt like a mummy wrapped in linen, with white fabric crisscrossing over his face, forehead, and tickling his neck. He took short, shallow breaths as he realized that tight bandages were also holding his chest down. His hands were tied so tightly that he couldn't even move his fingers. He let out a weak whimper of pain as the slightest movement sent a spike of agony down his spine. When he tried to figure out where he was, his eyes wouldn't open and his eyelids were heavier than ever. Forcing them with his will, fighting his body the whole way, only sent a wave of new pain along with a blinding flash of momentary sight. He didn't have to be a genius to realize he was in big trouble. Naruto thought that he was probably in Konoha's hospital. This wasn't the first time he had ended up here, and it probably wouldn't be the last. If he had still been outside, he would have heard a lot more sounds. This meant that someone had to have gotten him out of whatever stupid thing he was doing now, since he had apparently hurt himself. There was nothing but a deep, cold silence and the painful beat of his own heart, and neither was helping. What happened that hurt me? Everything was blurry. His last nightmares were still playing in his head, and distorted images of a battle he had seen many times in his worst dreams were coming back to him. During the battle, he watched as his parents died and he was powerless to stop it, giving in to Kurama's control. As usual, the berserk beast stabbed him when he was trying to save his mother. I must have been dreaming. Delirium and fever-related hallucinations. But what happened to hurt him? He started thinking about Konohamaru from the day before. Even though he wasn't a squirt anymore, that kid was growing up too fast for him. Right, he was on his way to meet with old lady Tsunade, and he was actually looking forward to it. He wanted to show off his newest technique, the Hiraishin, which was an S-rank move that only one other person knew. Then. Pain. Had he botched that technique? The idea that he had hurt himself in his attempt, right in front of Konohamaru or Tsunade, was unsettling. He shivered at the thought and decided to get out of bed soon and tell his former student and rival that everything was fine. He never needed much time to get better. Naruto tried to open his eyes again, wincing in pain and hoping to move something, anything. In short, he was worried that he might have left something behind in his stupid attempt to force the Hiraishin to do what he wanted. He had a disturbing picture of Konohamaru staring at a severed leg that was still dripping blood while the rest of him was somewhere else. His quick, panicked breaths hurt his lungs, and he tried to stop thinking about horrible things. After a few long minutes of panicking, he felt one of his toes move, brushing against soft fabric. Good, at least he still had one leg, so that was something. If that was all he had left, he could still be the fastest hopping shinobi. The silence was eating him up, especially the feeling of emptiness it brought with it, and Naruto's thoughts went inward to the vague pain in his stomach, which was probably bandaged like the rest of him. But he didn't care much about the skin. He was more interested in what was hidden underneath. Kurama. Nobody answered. He called out to his friend a few more times, but the creature in the cage, who had become almost like a friend, did not hear him or answer. Naruto only found a swirling void inside, and even his own thoughts sounded muffled. He was hurt, and Kurama probably wore himself out trying to keep him alive. His injuries seemed serious, and the fact that his faster healing hadn't fixed him up yet was worrying. He stopped thinking as he thought about his nightmare and the strange feeling of emptiness that surrounded him now, as if a noise that had been going on for a long time had suddenly stopped. He could barely feel more than a hint of Kurama's chakra in his veins. They had never felt this clear and clean, with only his own chakra flowing freely. It seemed like the fox had disappeared. Instead, when he got to the place deep within where the seal was supposed to be, he felt a swirling touch of something else. Something that made me feel confident, proud, and comforted. He knew that feeling couldn't be real, but he understood it. Father? He sighed when nobody answered. He could only feel a small bit of it, a spark of chakra that was far away and going in the wrong direction. It was a remnant of intent and action. Maybe it was his last breath, but it still lived on inside of him. It was like the piece of the fourth Hokage that had once appeared to him to help him close his seal had returned to the seal. Yet, that chakra had been used up to the point where it disappeared into nothingness. How could it be happening again? Unless he remembered his nightmare, those last horrifying moments, and the raging Kyuubi. Kurama was ripped out of the seal by a Jinchuriki and eaten by a much larger creature that towered over everyone else. He remembered standing up to it and using his last bit of strength to seal it away and force it into a new body. That couldn't have happened. It happened in a dream, didn't it? Naruto tried to scream, but all he could do was make a weak gurgle that turned into a coughing fit. Had it actually happened? Had he sealed away Kurama and what remained of his parents? Had they died a second time? He focused on the seal and called out to that part of his father, asking for any sign that he was still alive, that he had cheated death. That Naruto had not missed his one chance to save his parents. His body shook uncontrollably as a flood of emotions rushed through him, and he twitched as his eyes snapped open in the dark. He struggled through the pain, glad that he could now see the ceiling and get a sense of reality. Even the dim light in the room hurt his eyes, but he ignored the pain and took in his surroundings. He coughed and spat out a mixture of blood and slime, but his disgust was cut short when a tall figure whose chakra was tightly controlled walked into the room. The shape moved into view, but it looked more like a shadow than a person, and it cocked its head to the side like a bird. There was no normal face, just a strange mask. Naruto thought, irrationally, that it was Tobi bragging, and he hissed in fear or anger, he didn't know which. It took him a few seconds to realize he was actually looking at an Anbu, a specialist shinobi from Konoha. His mask looked like a rat. Naruto couldn't remember if he had ever seen the rat mask in use or not. Before he could say anything, the Anbu spoke. Rat whispered, "Sir, try not to move. Your injuries are serious," but even that sound seemed to echo in Naruto's head, hurting the silence. He gave an extremely small bow. "I'll tell Sarutobi-sama that you've woken up. Please rest." No matter how hard Naruto tried, he couldn't hold on to the image of the rat-masked ninja. He was too tired, and his body betrayed him when his heavy eyelids closed again and the room disappeared. Naruto was on the verge of losing consciousness, but he could just barely feel someone using medical jutsu on him. The warmth of foreign chakra eased his pain and put him to sleep. He thought that Sakura had reached him, and he gave the smallest smile before pain and darkness took it away. It could have been hours or even days before he woke up again, but he thought it was probably closer to the shorter end because he could feel that the bandages on his face had not been changed and were still wet with sweat and blood. There was no other way to tell time when waves of forgetfulness and emptiness kept washing over him. There were also no windows in the room, which was dimly lit, probably to keep his eyes from hurting. The pain wasn't as bad as it had been before, and he looked around the room again, pausing on little shelves with scrolls, small bottles with pills, and a single three-pronged kunai. A baby was crying somewhere nearby. That was what woke him up, and he turned very slowly in the direction of the sound. "You're awake again." It was a careful statement from the darkness nearby, spoken with some hesitation. Spoken by an old, familiar voice from long ago. When Naruto realized what that might mean, he started to cry. "I was starting to worry that the fever would keep you away," the third Hokage said in a kind voice. "How are you feeling?" Naruto stammered. Water," he wheezed into the dark room. His throat felt like the desert of Suna, dry and unforgiving. He gritted his teeth at the thought that the first thing he said to the old man, who had come back from the dead, was such an ordinary request. When Naruto tasted water on his dry lips, he instinctively reached for the small bowl. Pain shot through his arm, but he pushed through it because he had felt much worse. Still, he managed to move his hand, which was like trying to break 1,000 chains. Slowly and carefully, he met the offered bowl halfway and lifted his head as much as he could to take the food. Even if it was a simple request, he didn't care. The water from the small stream tasted like ambrosia, the sweet wine of the gods. It was like a dream come true, a fresh taste of life, but it just wasn't enough. Too good to be true and too pure to drink without hesitation. Naruto tilted the bowl even more. More. He had just started to realize how bad his throat hurt. Had he been screaming? The cold water hurt, but it felt good, cleansing. The water ran down his chin and onto his pillow. His bandages got wet and soggy, releasing the smell of dried blood. It made him shiver with relief, and he wished that the cool touch would last forever. It wasn't enough to put out the flames that seemed to burn his throat, but most of the roughness went away. More?" he asked, trying to focus his eyes but finding himself drawn to the thirds. The third time, the thought came back to me with full force. Could he really be talking to the man whose funeral he had attended? His grandfather in all but name got up from the bed, and Naruto lost sight of him in the dark. He disappeared into the shadows as well as any Nara could. There was still a child crying, somewhere in the room. Why wasn't someone watching over a child? He tried to turn his head to see through the darkness of the room, but the movement hurt and made him shiver. Still, he could move slowly and carefully. That was an encouraging sign. All of his parts seemed to be where they were supposed to be, even though they were all covered in bloody bandages. Suddenly, the small light of a candle flickered on, filling the room with thousands of shadows. It was the only light in a place where there was only darkness. There was no child in the direction of the high-pitched cries. He had been fooled by the strange echoes of the small, enclosed room. He wondered if the misdirection was on purpose. He could tell that some of the medical nin were paranoid to that degree. The third Hokage was looking down at him. His silhouette didn't have his usual triangular hat, which made Naruto a little confused, but the image of a somewhat short but powerful man was clear. Maybe. He threw away the idea because it wouldn't help him to guess without any evidence. Kakashi had once told him that guessing without knowing anything was useless. Obviously, that could have been about the plot of the next issue of Icha Icha, but the idea was good. What do I even know? Someone who had to be the third Hokage was pouring him a new bowl of water and taking care of his small, happy-looking candle. Strangely, besides the little child, it didn't feel like anyone else was in the room. Where were the Anbu, the always there watchmen? Possibly outside the door. The baby was still crying, and Naruto had to turn all the way around to see him in the far corner of the room. As he lifted himself up a little, wet hair and fabric stuck to the back of his neck, which was uncomfortable. So, that's what happened. A small crib where a small child was moving around and crying about something that could have been pain, hunger, or a recent nightmare. Who could tell when children are involved? Naruto felt a chill go down his spine when he saw a small tuft of bright blonde hair on top of chubby cheeks that were scarred with 3 small lines. Whiskers, almost. The candle cast ghostly shadows over those familiar features, and he couldn't help but be surprised. He suddenly realized it was him. The child was a baby Naruto. The nightmare actually happened. He let out a pitiful sob as his mind raced back to the moment he had arrived, when he had stood next to his father, who was still alive, and helped him finish the ritual that took away his life. Naruto's younger self had been there, and now he was back where he started. A new, handmade Jinchuriki. It did not make sense that the boy was there. In Konoha's hospital, there was a separate wing for little kids, and Naruto was sure that the third, knowing what he carried inside him, would have put the baby in the safest part of it. Still, he was with him in one of the hospital's enclosed wings. Based on the fact that there were no windows, this room was for injured visitors or prisoners. He figured that most shinobi were a mix of the two. It was not meant for children, though. "Please help yourself," Sarutobi said as she offered another small bowl of water. The old man's eyes went to the child, then back to him, and Naruto could almost feel the gears turning. The third was not trying to show it, but he was clearly paying a great deal of attention to the little crying child, even as his eyes peered seemingly through Naruto. His eyes weren't mean, but maybe they were curious or he was thinking or planning. All of those seemed plausible to him. Naruto weakly pointed at the baby at himself. "Could you assist?" Sarutobi again offered his water-filled cup. Even though Naruto ignored the gesture, his throat still felt dry. This was not like the old man at all, and he tried to sit up to get some air so he could actually speak. It did not do much to help. "Give. Here," he mumbled, pointing to the water. The words came out slowly, and his tongue felt like it hadn't been used in a long time. This was probably the longest time he had ever been in a hospital, based on how raspy his voice was. If Kurama had been there, he was sure he would have gotten better by now. But that wasn't the case. First time in his life, he was just a normal person. "Go help." It was almost impossible for him to sit up because the pain was so bad in his chest, where Kurama's sharp claw had pierced him. He suddenly found himself breathing so quickly that he couldn't find any strength in himself, and he just sagged in place. As soon as he thought of that wound, it seemed to rebel against him, and icy pain tore through his side. The third felt sorry for Naruto and helped him get up and into a more comfortable position. Then he realized that, even though the third seemed old, he was actually more than 10 years younger than the man he remembered best. In the candlelight, it was hard to tell what was going through Sarutobi's mind as he stood there with his face completely still. His eyes were the darkest shadows, but there were tiny lights in them that betrayed the darkness. His candle seemed to shine brighter than the sun, and Naruto's eyes just wouldn't adjust. He sighed. He managed to move his trembling hand enough to grab the water and drink. A couple more swallows. "What about little Naruto?" was his first full question as he listened to his younger counterpart's cries. "Why are you looking after me when he's crying?" Sarutobi gave a small nod and moved carefully toward the crib. Naruto heard the soothing whispers the third used to calm the baby. It felt strangely familiar. He could almost see himself as a little boy listening to a song like this while sitting on the old man's lap as he did his paperwork with a small smile. He thought that it might have happened, but he was probably too young to remember clearly. The method of calming worked, too. Little Naruto calmed down and started to listen to the third, moving easily to the rhythm, and getting calmer by the second. Slowly, the boy's eyes slowly closed. Naruto struggled with his water. He tried to get a little more leverage by bringing his other hand up, but it was almost impossible. His muscles felt like rubber, so it was like holding a heavy weight or doing something incredibly strong. And this was just a small bowl of water. He couldn't even imagine walking right now. He was completely harmless. He drank again, but this time he did it slower, more carefully, and with patience. This time, he didn't get a single drop on the floor. This time, it wouldn't have mattered. It took him a while to get it all out, but at least now he didn't feel like his throat was going to close up on him at any moment. Still hurt, but Naruto could live with pain if he had to. Trying to put the bowl on the nearby cabinet was too hard on his muscles, so it slipped and fell to the floor with a soft clatter. He was sure that catching the small wooden thing would have been too painful, so he didn't even try. After the lullaby calmed the little boy down, the old man turned around, picked up the bowl, and looked directly into Naruto's eyes. The look lingered, judging Naruto's health. He was doing exactly what Naruto was doing. Watching and waiting. Naruto tried to be as patient as he could while frantically thinking. The Hokage, at least, probably thought he was a spy. That explains why he was in the secure wing and why the third moved slowly. What else would someone think if a complete stranger showed up in the middle of a disaster like the Kyuubi attack? He suddenly realized what he had done. The three-pronged kunai at the far end of the room was still there. He could see the flickering candlelight on its razor-sharp edges. Hiraishin. He had tried to use his father's method, but it had the opposite effect. Something that appeared to be impossible. Instead of going to the kunai, which was so close he could see it, something had pulled him off course and thrown him on a rough and painful ride through space and time to the beginning of everything. He ended up here. Here, when the Kyuubi attacked, in his father's last moments, was the only other person who had mastered it. He was in the past, and a theory was forming about why. There was an aspect of time manipulation in the seal of the Hiraishin, supposedly for mere milliseconds, just barely enough to make the technique work. Not days, not weeks, and definitely not years. But he had done just that. Beaten the limits. Kurama. That was the only reason for what happened. Chakra from the tailed beast was pulsing in his veins, mixing with his own as he let it run wild and focused on the new technique. The chakra didn't hurt him because he was used to it, but he hadn't thought about what it could do to a jutsu like this. His father was not a Jinchuriki. He only ever used his own chakra for this technique. Yet, Naruto had poured in his own considerably supply, and in his failure to reach his intended destination, had used that which was he could grasp to extend the time available to him. The Nine Tails' power is incredibly strong and impossible to predict. He was lucky he had not appeared above the dinner table of the first Hokage in Uchiha Madara, all things considered. Yet, Kurama was gone. After Naruto used the Hiraishin technique and drained the creature's chakra, it suddenly found itself in a reality where it already existed. Unlike physical beings, the tailed beast had no way to deal with the paradox of existing more than once. He didn't have any clever time travel tricks to get around this problem, so the stronger one, the Kyuubi that attacked Konoha, ate him up and absorbed the future Kurama right through the seal. Naruto grimaced as his thoughts drifted back to the third. He put the situation aside for a moment to focus on more pressing matters. A younger third, who had just been robbed of his replacement, would definitely take his seat back soon. He was called the God of Shinobi, and most people agree that he was probably the strongest ninja since the first. What would this man do with the information he could provide? What would a cage do with the key to the future after a war and the most devastating attack on the village anyone could remember? How do I tell others who I am? Naruto thought about the question for a moment and wondered if he could even use his experiences as a guide, since he had never really known the third as a cage, only as a grandfatherly figure. He could only remember the man going all out once, when he died. He thought that telling the truth was his best bet, but he had no idea how the old man would react. Could he even lie directly to the third if he wanted to? Naruto took a deep breath, feeling the emptiness in his stomach make way for an uneasy queasiness. Nothing happens. He opened his mouth, paused as if he couldn't decide, and only took a single shuddering breath. He thought quickly of something unimportant to ask to buy himself a few seconds. Either that, or he blurted out everything he knew at once to get it over with. Sarutobi spoke up first when he hesitated. The seal was put on correctly, in case you were wondering, Sarutobi said, looking at the child next to him with a caring look that made Naruto shiver. Little Naruto was peacefully sleeping in his crib, unaware of the tense situation. To call the Shinigami and lock away the weakened creature's chakra is a brave and selfless plan. I can see that the seal is based on Kushina's, but it is much more complicated. What is its purpose? Naruto made a frowning face and narrowed his eyes. Another test. He muttered under his breath, looking into the third's eyes. When the old man looked at him with such intensity that it made him lose his breath, he moved slightly. In his condition, he couldn't run away, but the third was showing him, at least in part, his awesome power on purpose. In the light of the flickering candle, the third smiled, his eyes shining with interest. That seal is not meant to keep the Kyuubi locked away forever, Naruto sighed, and the lack of surprise in the third's eyes told him that the man already knew. He could see how tense the old man was, though, and he knew he had better answer or face that god of shinobi, while he was too weak to even move. The Biju are not evil in and of themselves. They are more like forces of nature. A volcano that erupts in the middle of a village doesn't want to destroy it out of some kind of misunderstood anger. Yet, all we humans have ever done for the Biju is seal them in living people to try to silence them, so it is natural to expect resistance. Their power, though, will be needed. The third murmured in surprise but didn't object. The Hake no Fuin Shiki is not a prison, it is a gate. A locked gate, but one that could be opened with the right key. When the Kyuubi understands what it means to exist inside a Jinchuriki, and I know that that will happen since the seal doesn't prohibit him from watching what is going on outside, it's going to become something more than a beast. If I am somehow wrong, though. Naruto shifted a bit in his bed, pain in his chest intensifying, but he ignored it. The seal is made to let a few drops of chakra leak through, slowly draining the fox of its power so that it can't be easily set free. It would take years of living together for this to work, though. Coexistence. Naruto shivered as he thought about the panicked moment when the 9 tails had been torn away. He hoped that some of Kurama would live on in the child. If it weren't right, it wouldn't be right. Being a Jinchuriki is an almost impossible responsibility to take on, Naruto whispered, realizing that the one thing that had always been there for him in all his years as a shinobi was now gone, ripped away by force, and eaten. Kurama was part of him in the end. If not a friend, then a true companion. A biju that just happened to share his body and life. Now, there was nothing left, at least for him. In the end, it might be for the best. For who? Sarutobi didn't say anything, but Naruto could tell that, inside, he was quickly making connections and throwing out theories one by one, as all geniuses did. For Naruto, or for Konoha? He asked. How can you even ask that? Naruto spluttered then, somewhat confused as to the shift in topic. Konoha was always my top priority. The third frowned, and his eyes locked onto Naruto. Is that why you let Kushina use her clan technique, knowing it would kill her? Is that why you didn't use the Shiki Fujin yourself, so you could live for Konoha? What? Naruto felt anger rising in him, but it wasn't as strong as when he fought with Kurama. He was still furious, though, and clenched his fists even though they hurt. At least one wound tore open and started bleeding again. The warm blood woke him up from his sleep. He hissed the next words louder than before, the memories of that terrible fight at the forefront of his mind. I never wanted them to die, old man. She, Mom, should have lived, but she was so stubborn, and Dad. I should have been the one to use that method, not him. Then I would have had a father, like it should have been from the start. I never wished for anything like this. I lost everything again. The loud shouts woke up the little child, making him twitch in his sleep. Naruto looked at him, and a chill ran down his spine as he realized what it meant that little Naruto was there. It was a miracle, but the child didn't wake up, and Naruto turned back to the Sarutobi, not calmer by any means, but maybe a little more centered. The third Hokage smiled briefly in the shadows, as if he had just won a tough game of shogi against Inara, but the smile was gone so quickly that Naruto wondered if he had really seen it. What is your game, Oji-san? Naruto finally asked, trying to stay calm even though he was still angry on the inside and felt blood running down his hand and onto the white sheets of his bed. I don't get what you're saying. Why do you start by asking about that damned seal? The third raised his eyebrows. Tell me. When you sealed away the Kyuubi, you were already hurt, right? He didn't care that Naruto was angry, but he was clearly intrigued by the way he talked to him. I saw the demon chakra flowing through you and through your wounds. It did the same to many other people in the village, and all but a few of them died from it, rotting away from its corrupting influence and poison. That only happens if you don't know how to stop its effects, Naruto grunted more than he said. Of course I know. Don't insult my intelligence, even if I'm not a genius. You must know me well enough to put me in the same room as the kid. He looked over. You probably have me covered with more chakra-suppressing seals than I can count, so just say it. I can't stop you. How do you know the seal will work? The third asked, ignoring the demand. Of course I know it will work, because I've seen it work. Naruto tried to cross his arms, which made the sheets even dirtier, but he had to give up halfway because his arms wouldn't move properly. He had to settle for a glare. Look, you're obviously trying to trick me into some kind of verbal trap, and I get enough of that from Shikamaru. Skip the middle part and get to the end. He thought for a moment that Sarutobi was smiling again, but his eyes stayed hard. The attack hurt a lot of people, and the Kyuubi's chakra is bad for both the body and the mind. When we found you, you were covered in blood, and the vile chakra ate at you even as your body threw it out. Most of the people who didn't die after being exposed to that chakra are also in the hospital, in the mental ward. Naruto felt like he would get sick. What happened? The third sighed. Delusional, murderous, and doesn't care who they kill. Most of them are civilians, so they don't pose much of a threat. You can imagine that shinobi are a different story. I'm afraid it will be a few weeks before your body recovers from what happened. Even if you get the best care from the best people we have, I think you'll still have scars, he said after a long pause. Before I move on, we need to clear something up. You aren't Minato, are you? Naruto blinked twice in confusion. No way, what are you? He shook his head slightly. I get it. You think I'm crazy too, don't you? But why? He looked at his bandaged body and was surprised to see that, with his shaggy blonde hair and blue eyes, he did look a lot like his father. They were also about the same age, which was even stranger. He was wearing the cloak and holding a three-pronged kunai. Yeah, I can see why you would. But you can do tests or something to make sure, right? Naruto tried to figure out what Sarutobi was thinking while the man just stood there doing nothing. He had spent enough time with the old Hokage to get an idea of what he was like, but he couldn't be sure. But it didn't seem likely that the old man would actually think he was his father. If he did, though, he would need to stop that right now. Naruto narrowed his eyes and grunted. You've got it all wrong. Minato, my dad, is dead. I saw him die. I felt the last of his chakra leave him when he used his last moments to tear out the Kyuubi's chakra, sealing some of it in the Death God. I'm not him, and I'm not sure how you could mistake us for each other. I guess I look too much like a mummy to tell, but that shouldn't matter. He stopped and looked again at the little boy, who was happy to sleep in and didn't know that crazy things were going to happen to him in the future. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I'm not Minato, I'm his son. He winced as he pulled himself up more forcefully and noticed that something tore on his back. It was the stitches, which were tearing the skin apart from the stress. I used the Hiraishin. I was only the second person to do so, as far as I know. As you probably know, that's a time and space jutsu. I accidentally overloaded it with Kyuubi's chakra, and when I finally got a grip, I was here and now. I am the boy in that crib. I am from the future. Sarutobi nodded again, and this time he definitely smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile, as it reminded Naruto more of a vicious predator, rather than his Oji-san. The old man folded his arms across his chest. Very well. Show it. A few hours before, a student met his teacher behind closed doors in the Hokage's tower, which had been damaged by the Kyuubi. Even though some parts of the building were on fire, a few trusted Anbu were standing guard outside of it. They didn't let anyone come within hearing distance, just in case someone tried to do something funny while the village was hurting. Konoha's future was being talked about, and there was no such thing as too much security. Jiraiya of the Sannin stood next to the crumbling remains of the western wing and shook his head in dismay. He had been out of the village when the attack occurred, as he was chasing down interesting tidbits in neighboring countries. He didn't find out what had happened until a day or two later, when word got across the borders. He hurried home as quickly as he could. He had cursed his decision not to summon any of his toads while undercover, realizing that he would have known far sooner. It was too late now. Iwa was just as wary of Konoha as she had always been, and when they first talked about the possibility that their old enemy, who had beaten them so badly in the Third Shinobi World War, had been weakened or even destroyed, Jiraiya thought it was just a rumor that was being blown out of proportion, as was common with rumors like that. Claims that the village was a smoking crater or burning like a candle were obviously exaggerated, but a pattern quickly became clear. Disaster. The Yellow Flash was dead, some claimed. Others talked about his injuries and how he was carried off the battlefield with only a bloody cloak wrapped around him as he bled to death. The rumors were spread with a certain amount of glee among the people of Iwa, considering the massacres that Minato had been responsible for among their forces in the war, but Jiraiya had forced himself to ignore it, and to make his way to the border with as much speed as he could without being spotted as a spy. The toads had filled him in by the time he reached Konoha's walls. Gamatora had shown him the key to a seal, though he was less than coherent about the circumstances in which he had received it, and a worrying possibility occurred to Jiraiya. The key was definitely for a very complicated seal. It was strong enough to lock away something powerful and big. Like a tailed beast, like the Kyuubi. The total silence from Konoha, either from his old sensei or his student, only made things seem more dire. Setting aside his own worries for the moment, he thought of repercussions to the international relations that he had been sent to monitor. Even just the rumor of Minato's death would show Konoha's enemies that they are weak. Although he had been a cage for only a relatively short time, Minato's reputation was legendary, and Iwa in particular was terrified of facing him on the battlefield, refusing even to come too close to the border. With him dead or wounded, they might decide that now's the time to take what they wanted. On top of that, there was Kyuubi no Yuko to consider. A tailed beast didn't just disappear, and Jiraiya had a bad feeling that he knew what had happened to it. Released from Kushina's seal, surely killing her, the only way to get rid of it would be to place it somewhere new, and he suspected that's what the key was for. It was for the seal of a new Jinchuriki. Sarutobi seemed quite surprised when Jiraiya appeared before him in the ruins of his ruined tower, exhausted and sleepy, though with boundless determination clear on his face. Without any delay, the two nin had adjourned to Minato's office, which had survived the worst of the Kyuubi's assault. "I came as quickly as I could," Jiraiya said. "The Nine Tails? I can hardly believe it," he said as he shook his head. "How? How did it escape from the seal? I checked it only a month or two ago. Kushina was in good shape." The third sighs. "A good question. I do not know the answer," he replied, folding his hands together as he sat down at the desk, in the chair that had been his for decades, though it had recently become Minato's domain. "We can assume that whoever released the creature knew where it was kept, and when the seal would be at its very weakest." Childbirth. Sarutobi nodded slowly. Kushina was in a safe and secluded place, well outside the village, just in case something should go wrong. Minato was there. Although it is uncertain what exactly happened then, we know that the creature was brought here, perhaps summoned from afar, after it was torn away from its host. Kushina survived, for a time. Uzumaki longevity, I'm sure, but it took her life to get it placed into a new vessel before it could destroy everything. "Then she's dead," Jiraiya sighed. "It killed her, Shiki Fujin?" he asked, although he was sure he knew the answer. "And Minato was the one to seal it away?" The third nodded slightly, though it was a hesitant gesture. He made a sighing sound. "I dunno." Jiraiya narrowed his eyes. "All right, what's that about? What's going on?" "Naruto became the new Jinchuriki. That's a fact," Sarutobi answered at last. "Their son, who was just born, was given the same tradition that has been passed down the Uzumaki lineage since Konoha's beginnings. I guess it's fitting, but it's a heavy burden to carry," he said with a frown. "There's something strange about all of this, Jiraiya, and not just the seal, which is much more complicated than I expected. There's also a certain person." There was a silence for a little time as Sarutobi gazed out of his window, cracked and wobbly, before he turned and shook his head. "I know I should be focusing on other things, but I can't let this go. The destruction has weakened the village's defenses and morale. Your presence will help a little, and I've also sent a messenger to find Tsunade. We'll need all the help we can get to get through this storm." "It looks even worse than I thought," Jiraiya said when he finally sat down across from Sarutobi. "The fox did a lot of damage to the village. Hundreds are dead." And it was true. Even a week after the Kyuubi attack, Konoha was still in ruins, with soot still making the air dirty. Wildfires burned throughout the depths of the forest, and buildings slowly crumbled to the ground, torn from their foundations. The surrounding woods had new clearings that had been torn up by huge claws, and the whole landscape had been changed by an act of unfathomable violence. The outer wall was still there, at least in part, but there were big holes that needed to be filled, and the Uchiha police forces were working overtime just to bring a little bit of order into the chaos. It didn't help that many of them had died trying to drive the creature out of the village. The physical damage was small compared to the number of deaths in the air and the clear feeling of hopelessness that everyone had after the tragedy, when the full extent of the chaos became clear. In one vicious slash of fate, Konoha had lost most of its powerful shinobi, and many more were still struggling with their life in the hospital, perhaps never to fight again. Madness was too common, whether it was caused by the Kyuubi's poisonous chakra or not, and more than one shinobi had to be killed because they were attacking innocent villagers thinking they were terrible demons. "It will take years for Konoha to get back to how it used to be," Sarutobi said softly, looking tired and old. "I'm sure that surrounding nations are already watching us with anticipation, preparing to step in if our weakness becomes too overt to ignore." "Unfortunately, that's true," Jiraiya nodded. "Onoki the fence-sitter would have acted already if he didn't think the cage would hit him in the back if he did anything. Word on the streets of Iwagakure is that the cage thinks Onoki will die soon and wants to take advantage of the situation." Jiraiya took a sip of sake, savoring the taste as he wondered how long it would be before he could really enjoy it again. "Onoki is furious, but that probably means he's too busy to actually invade us. He went as far as to claim that he's not going to appoint a successor anytime soon, which suggests that we're an afterthought. He could change his mind, however." "That talk you mentioned," the third said contemplatively, his eyes gleaming for a short moment. "Could it have started at one of Iwa's bathhouses? They do have good baths." Jiraiya allowed himself a short, wavering smile. "Iwa's uncertainty should give us space for maneuvering. Though, we should not delay too much. The Tsuchikage might come here personally, if he thinks that he has anything to gain by it, and if he sees this downtrodden village, he certainly would not hesitate to barge in. The third made a slow nod, and Jiraiya shook his head. Alright, enough with the politics, I put this off long enough. Tell me, Kushina is dead, Naruto was born and cursed to be a Jinchuriki, and what happened to Minato? Sarutobi sighed. Jiraiya winced. Dead, then? Maybe. Sarutobi fingered his pipe slowly. When the Kyuubi was free and rending apart the village, Minato and Kushina locked themselves away with it, behind protective barriers, far outside the walls where its fury could not tear up the villagers any further. Their chains and space-time barrier blocked me. I had no chance to break through quickly enough to help. When the creature was sealed away, all those techniques were destroyed. The barriers came down, and I made my way in. There, I found someone. Jiraiya frowned uncertainly. Someone. The third nodded wearily. Little Naruto and one other person survived. At first, I thought the other person was Minato. He was bleeding out, and the Kyuubi's chakra had burned him all over, so there wasn't much I could do but make sure the child would have a father. I brought him back here, thinking he was my successor, but I realized something was wrong when I helped him clean his wounds. Even now, there aren't many medical nin around. Jiraiya blinked. If he is not Minato, then who is this person? I don't know, the third admitted, shrugging his shoulders helplessly. He has Minato's blonde hair, his eyes, and he was wearing his cloak. I feared that he might be Minato, tainted by the Kyuubi, doomed to insanity like so many others, but when I reached him, he was awake for a few moments, only calling for Naruto. He poured himself a drink as he shivered. Yet, there were too many little things that do not fit. I don't think he's Minato, after all. Which begs the question, who is he? An intruder? Perhaps the one who released the tailed beast in the first place. But that does not fit, since he seems to have completed the ritual that made little Naruto a Jinchuriki, greatly endangering himself in the process. What traitor would unleash the creature, only to reseal it into a newborn that he would know would be heavily guarded? Much less with the last of his chakra? Jiraiya paced through the room. You have not been able to ask questions yet, I take it. These sounds like the half-formed hypotheses of someone who has not been getting enough sleep. He sent a warning look to his old sensei. Has that person woken up yet? No, Sarutobi answered softly. If that didn't present us enough of a puzzle, it seems he might not even live to talk about what he did. His condition has been critical for the entire week, and is slow in improving. If he meant to do something terrible, he had a strange way of going about it. Jiraiya hummed under his breath, concerned. Why do you believe he is someone else, then? Physical changes. The third one nodded. He seems different. I'm sure you would be able to notice it too. There's something that doesn't quite fit. Maybe in the shape of his jaw and the slightly different slant of his eyes, or the proportions, the same type of differences that you would use to distinguish a poor henge from the real person. I used an older photo for comparison, not trusting my memory, and there are more of these little details. Too many not to be noticed under scrutiny. And the whiskers, they completely baffle me. They look much the same that Naruto has, in fact. I can't be sure unless I see him for myself, Jiraiya shrugged. He used the Hake no Fuin Shiki, I gather. It might be the cause of that last feature, although I would not stake my life on it. It seems somewhat plausible, though. How so? Sarutobi downed his sake in a quick gulp, without taking pleasure in it. He merely desired to deaden his nerves for a while, lest he collapse from his schedule, which barely contained any sleeping hours at all. He would not admit to it, but Jiraiya was perceptive as always. Biju chakra works in seemingly chaotic patterns. Jiraiya started his explanation, frowning darkly. Minato and I spent some time discussing that particular theoretical aspect a couple of years ago, as an intellectual challenge. It is not unheard of for a Jinchuriki to obtain some physical features reminiscent of the Biju, if exposed to the channeled chakra. There are several examples of it throughout history. So, an accident, huh? Jiraiya did not respond immediately, rubbing his chin. Not necessarily. The theory would allow for a deliberate attempt, though I would not know why anyone should desire these features. With the way this seal works, as far as I can tell, it forces the Kyuubi's chakra down both bodies, the one using the seal serving as a conduit for the energy pouring into the Jinchuriki. It should not have been enough to induce physical changes, since the human body gives away under the strain long before then. Yet, Minato could have found a way for outlasting that terrible chakra. He was always a genius when it came to chakra manipulation. I would not put it past him that he figured out a way to protect itself from the corrupting influence. There is something else. A strange chakra signature. Sarutobi took out a small piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the table. I had it examined by one of the medical nin that I swore to silence, but he could make neither heads nor tails of the results of the analysis. I could only make educated guesses. Maybe you could shed some light? Jiraiya glanced over the contents of the paper quickly, tracing the sketched graphs with narrowed eyes as his mind jumped to huge lists of obscure numbers that he had learned like the back of his hand, decades ago. Two of the lines were very familiar. There's a trace of Biju chakra, which was to be expected. Some of it matches Naruto's chakra when I last checked, but it's hard to measure chakra in the unborn, so that's debatable. Since Naruto is now a Jinchuriki, all bets are off. There's also a strange mix of Minato's chakra and Kushina's. The Sannin blinked. I had no idea that could happen. Remarkable. I hypothesized that this person might have received it when she died via the Shiki Fujin. The chakra might have latched onto something familiar, the third supplied, when Jiraiya didn't continue. Kushina's body is only a shell now, not even a trace of leftover chakra. Maybe, Jiraiya allowed. I can't claim to understand the whole thing, but I have the key to the seal from Minato. It's really complicated fuinjutsu work. I'm going to need to take a look at his kid to be sure, and it might take me more than a couple of days to decipher it fully, but the main difference is in the way of sealing. The key suggests that it is on an entirely different level than the usual Uzumaki seals. Minato improved it, retaining only the base of Kushina's sealing techniques. Judging by what I've seen, this seal should even allow the Biju some awareness, and possibly release chakra into its host. He shivered. What are you doing? Jiraiya smiled thinly. Minato always surprised me with new ideas. Maybe there's more to it that we can't even guess. But I'm sure it will be a solid piece of work. If something goes wrong, I have the key, so I'll be able to tighten or loosen it a bit. Minato wouldn't just put the village in danger. If Minato made the seal, Sarutobi said, looking worriedly at Jiraiya. If I am right, and we have an imposter in Minato's place, what then? I witnessed the final part of the sealing, after Kushina's shield fell, and there was no chance a switch could have happened at that time. The person I retrieved is the one who sealed away the fox. If he is someone else, what would that mean? What dangers could be hidden in the seal, placed as it was by a stranger? Jiraiya frowned, weighing the possibility seriously. Whoever this person is, Minato or not, he must have used a toad summon to bring the key to me, and that must have been one of the last parts of the sealing process. Did you notice Gamatora at all? I did see a summon leave, Sarutobi agreed. I think it was a toad, but we cannot take that for a fact. It is supposed to be impossible to trick a summoning contract, Jiraiya said. I could ask Bunta, but I doubt that any of his folk would show up to a stranger, and I've got the summoning contract. He paused for a long time. Assuming that we are dealing with an imposter, a very good one, you will assign secret observation, I imagine? No, Sarutobi smirked at his student. Minato was always too good not to notice Anbu following him, and any pretender would know that. No, I would ask you to be his tag along, at least for now. The real Minato would appreciate the help, and you are definitely someone who could figure out if my disturbing suspicions are right. Why do I feel that it is not going to be as easy as it sounds? Jiraiya frowned. Are you going to be taking the hat, until we are completely sure it's Minato? There was a loud knock on the door. Come on in, Sarutobi called. A brief warning glance sent Jiraiya's way. What happened? Sarutobi-sama, Jiraiya-sama. The Anbu with a rat mask bowed slightly. I come from the hospital. Hokage-sama woke up.
I will continue this story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.